Hi, I'm Kirk Kirkpatrick. You know, like many of you, I grew up reciting the Pledge to the Flag every day in school, and still do at many business functions throughout the year. But after a while, I found myself just reciting the words and not really thinking about what they meant. But that all changed for me about 30 years ago when a veteran taught me a very valuable lesson and shared his story with me. I want to share that story with you. Here he is. The year is 1942, and this is Lieutenant John Kirkpatrick, my dad, and his new wife then, Jane. He had enlisted right before they were married in September. 6 months later, March 16th, 1943, he arrived in England as a bombardier in the 305th Bomb Group, comprised of 4 squadrons of B-17s. Now, the bombardier is the one who drops the bombs. He's at the very front of the plane there that you see. And actually, here's a picture of his crew from early May 1943. Well, less than 2 weeks after this picture was taken on May 19th, he flew out of England on his 19th mission, and he was really excited because after 25 missions, you got to go home. But after losing 3 of 4 engines over Germany, and with shells from German fighters coming through his plane like BBs, he was shot down. He did manage to dive out through the bomb doors, and he banged one of his legs on the way out. As he told me, he said, you know, it doesn't take much nerve to get out of a plane when it's on fire. Only 5 members of his crew managed to get out of the plane alive that day. He was captured and taken to Stalag Luft III. That's the 3rd prison camp that the Germans built for captured airmen. And there were 1,200 prisoners there when he arrived, and there'd be more than 3,000 before he would leave on a very treacherous death march. There were vicious German police dogs and guards armed with machine guns everywhere around the prison, and the only way out was going to be underground. The ground underneath the camp was almost solid sand. He said it kept caving in when they were trying to build tunnels, and the Germans were constantly looking for tunnels too. But the British had it down to a science, and they decided to dig 3 at a time. And here are the 3 final tunnels that they tried to build: Tom, Dick, and Harry. That's what they named them. They had mining engineers and people who could help them make clothes and hats and identification papers that they could use in their escape. He was one of the tunnelers. He told me he would lie on his stomach digging for hours at a time underneath. He said after about an hour and a half, you just couldn't stay in there. It terrified me, he said. The tunnels were 30 feet deep, 50 yards long, and 20 yards to the barbed wire, and another 30 yards into the trees. And he dug using spoons and items he stole from the soup kitchen. Now, how did they hide the dirt from the tunnels? Well, they added dirt to their, quote, gardens where they were growing food. He said, you know, you felt like you were accomplishing something by risking your life to dig a tunnel to escape. In all, there were 100 tunnels that were dug. Most collapsed, many were discovered, and in fact, he was caught 3 different times digging tunnels, and each time he was put in the cooler. The cooler is a 12-foot by 12-foot hole in the ground where he stayed for 30 days each stint. Well, it took 5 months, but they finally finished one of the tunnels, and on March 24th, 1944, 76 men escaped from Stalag Luft III. Although it was a psychological win, 73 of them were captured, and later that same day, the Germans picked 50 prisoners, lined them up, and killed them in front of the remaining prisoners in order to teach them all a lesson about trying to escape from Stalag Luft III. Well, by January 1945, the Russians were closing in on the prison camp, so they were all told to get up, get dressed, and go on a march from Stalag Luft III all the way to Moosburg. It was below freezing, it was in the snow, they marched 35 miles just to get to the train station where they could be then transferred to the final prison. But the Germans were losing the war, and by April 28th, American airplanes were overhead dropping leaflets on all of the prisoners, telling them they're coming tomorrow. Don't move. My father's eyes would mist up with the memory of that German dawn. There were 37,000 pairs of eyes waiting for the Americans to save them. And first you could feel the tanks, then finally you could see them. And his eyes welled up in tears as he told me the story of seeing that one tank, the one that got close enough, that when he could finally see that big white star on the side of the tank, after seeing only swastikas for 2 years, he knew at that one moment what freedom really felt like. His 2 years of being a prisoner were over. So, ever since he told me that story more than 30 years ago, every time I look to the flag and before I say the pledge, I pick out one white star on the flag and think about him, the 37,000 other prisoners, and the millions of veterans that have sacrificed their lives, their families, and their talents so that we could enjoy the freedom that we have today. I hope you'll listen closely to the pledge as you recite them today, because they mean a lot more to me and my father than you may realize.